بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له إلها واحدا أحدا فردا صمدا لم يتخذ صاحبة ولا ولدا ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء وطاعته غناء يا حي يا قيوم يا من لا إله إلا أنت وأفضل الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وشفيع قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أبو القاسم محمد اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وآل محمد أما بعد, respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted us this blessing and this opportunity to come together and to engage in His remembrance and to seek His forgiveness and His guidance and the nur of hidayah and the nur of iman, and to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to recuperate and to rejuvenate and to rehabilitate our being and in particular our hearts. When the heart is safe and when the heart is, as the Quran mentions, Salim, that it is perfected and it is healthy and it is pure, then everything else is safeguarded as well. This religion is a religion that takes into account and calls us to focus on the inner and the outer. This is not a religion that simply focuses on the outer aspects of our lives and our existence, nor is it a religion that ignores the needs and the necessities and the day-to-day activities of human beings. But it is a religion that brings into harmony and perfection the inner and the outer, the zahir and the batin. And everything that we have in Islam that is external has to be understood and incorporated with the particular aim and goal and philosophy of what it does to our internal being. If we are praying, it has external movements, but this prayer is supposed to inspire and revolve this revolution in us that is internally transformative, right? And when the internal transformation happens in Islam, then the external facets and the external acts become true. They become real. They are not empty of their spirit. They are not empty of their substance. This is one of the challenges that anyone who engages in religion and on the religious path has to confront. There are certain challenges and crises that appear in the life of a religious person or someone who is pursuing religion. One is to understand what religion really says. What is really asked of me as a Muslim? What does it truly mean to be Muslim? What are the requirements? What are the key tenets and the beliefs of a Muslim? Some people struggle with this, right? Some people, for example, struggle with the idea of worship. They struggle with the idea that there can be evil in a world that has a creator, right? One of the very key and sort of basic and universal questions that are posed by individuals who are wrestling with the idea of religion, of God is, well, if there is a God, if there is a creator, why do we have suffering in this world? Why do we have difficulties? Why do we have challenges in this world? And then once reflection and engagement and research and other things are incorporated and they resolve this tension, they go to the next phase of religion, which is practice, right? But here's where the real challenge lies. In religion, in Islam, in this context, we have a lot of external components of worship. We have fasting, we have prayer, we have charity, right? But we have all of these other recitals and spiritual obligations. For some, as they are engaged with this, they are only focused on the external movements or the external performance of these acts, empty or completely taking lightly that this act has a philosophy, it has a hikmah, it has an aim. These acts have not been incorporated into the practice of Islam and Muslim life simply for you to do external movements and external rotations. They are to transpire something within you. Why is it that we take the Shahada in every prayer? Every prayer required the Shahada at least once. Why is it that we have 2 sajdas in every prayer? Right? Why do we have qiyam? Why is there standing in prayer? Why must we incorporate the recitation of the Quran and the rakat of the salat? Right? Why do we fast the particular way and in the particular frequency that we fast? Right? These are questions and these are things that the individual has to understand. Why do we incorporate wudu and spiritual ablution in our prayers? Right? Why must we, for example, have a particular type of garment and clothing when we pray? What are things that are considered najis and impure that if they were to be on our clothing, then we cannot pray in that? Right? So you have the basic things of blood and bowel and urine and other things, but you also have other components that are internal and interior to that. If the clothing matches all of the external requirements for tahara, but it is ghasbi, or it is something that has been usurped or wrongly acquired, no prayer can be counted in it. You can't pray in it. You can't make wudu with water that you do not have permission or a right to use, even if the aim of using that water is to perform prayer. And we're saying that the performance of prayer is the highest act of obedience in religion, is it not? But the philosophy of it, the interior process of it is something else. Right? It's this generation of sensitivity to justice and what is right. Right? How did I acquire the money and the means to wear this clothing? What type of water did I use? Right? What was the quantity of water that I used? These are all internal things that oftentimes we take very lightly in this religion. But religion and the challenges of religion also incorporate something very unique, and this is the topic for today. We are living in a world, brothers and sisters, that, as I've been mentioning these last couple of weeks, desensitizes us to one another. Right? One of the acts that is mustahab in coming to Salatul Jum'ah is to see how we are doing. So when I see the brothers here and the sisters here, when I see my beloved brother Sheikh Yusuf, and I say, how are you and how are you doing? Even these very few moments of exchange, it does something to the heart. See? The fact that Muslims can come together as believers and we can have care for one another, that if we speak to one another, albeit very briefly, and sincerely be concerned for one another, does something to the heart. Does something to the heart. We are living in times in a world in which the heart is forgotten. See? The heart is forgotten. The sensitivity and the care and the tenderness of the heart is forgotten. And when Islam comes and tells you, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, يُسَبِّحُ لِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ. Whatever is in the heavens and the earth, sing the praise of God. They sing the praise of God. They recite the praise of God. How can you hear the song of the wind? How can you hear the song of the flower? You know, nowadays, especially with this recent advancements and imagery that NASA released, did you hear the sound of the planets and the sound of, you know, a star being born or a black hole? They have a sound, right? And they do these frequencies where you can hear the sound, say, of a cactus, or the sound of this, or the sound of that. This is a sabh, this is a song, this is a sound that is produced that is spiritual. Any sound that creation creates is spiritual, even if they do not understand it. Which is why in some Irfani traditions and works, the breathing of the human being is counted as dhikr. They say that one of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Huwa. Huwa, right, is one of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This requires a long discussion. But when you inhale and exhale, if you're very careful and attuned to it, it has the sound of ha. This inhale and exhale, this ha, according to this interpretation of the mystics, itself is dhikr. That the human being, the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even unintentionally and subconsciously, the body is making the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we are unaware of it. Right? We are unaware of it. So in a world that prioritizes and insists on the self, the nafs, the material, it is revolutionary for Islam to come and say that the insistence and the emphasis shouldn't be on the nafs, shouldn't be on the self. It doesn't say to ignore and abandon the self. Islam never says this, to abandon the self. It says to abandon the ego. But it doesn't say to abandon your actual needs. You all have spiritual needs, you have emotional needs, you have physical needs, you have the need of movement. There are all these different things that a human being has in order to function. Islam doesn't say to abandon those things, but it says not to be drowned and inundated in the ego, right? So Islam comes and says, be a people who are a collective, be a people who are a community, be a people who are an ummah, united for something. And this unitedness moves beyond language, this moves beyond gender, this moves beyond geography. It's a sensitivity to one another. And this sensitivity to one another does something to the heart. It sensitizes the heart. That's a very beautiful, profound thing. Imagine an individual has lived an entire lifetime and they have abandoned their heart. Right? You've heard of these studies that they've done in which they ask people in old age, what are your regrets? What are your regrets? Nobody says, I didn't buy enough things. Nobody says, I didn't work enough. Everyone says a very few brief and interesting things. I should have incorporated and committed more time to relationships. And these studies are available. Harvard did one of the longest studies related to this. I should have spent more time in relationships, generating, building, protecting relationships, right? I should have worked less. I should have traveled more, right? I should have pursued a passion, something that gives meaning, right? These are very interesting things. I should have spent more time in philosophy and on the heart. These are very interesting things. But these are also informative in the sense that they show us there's something going on in this world that you and I are currently present in. We're living in 2022. We are impacted by all of the social and political and economic and philosophical challenges and pulls and pushes of this year, of this time that we are living in. We have to meet it. We have to recognize it. We have to understand it. So Islam comes and tells us to be attuned and to be sensitive to the mysteries that are around us, because all of these mysteries hold language of communication. The word mystery and mysticism in the English language derive from the root which means to close the eyes. Very interesting. It means to close the eyes. But in Islam, when we're talking about, let's say, Gnosticism or mysticism as it's understood here, this interest in the mystery, this interest in something that is beyond the surface, we generally use two terms, right? We use tasawwuf or we use arifan. And these two things mean the same thing. This isn't something different. This is political. When people say Sufis are one thing and Arafa are one, this is all political things that have been developed. But the real meaning, if we are to understand what a Sufi is and the different interpretations, the one who purifies or the one who wears the wool garb or the one who is Ahl Sufa and the people who are in the terrace around the mosque in the house of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, etc. Or an arif and irfan, meaning to have experiential knowledge. So an arif is not simply someone who performs the prayer, but has an experiential knowledge of prayer. The qiyam and the ruku' and the sujood and the tajlis, all of these things have a meaning that they understand. but it doesn't align with the English interpretation of to close the eyes, right? There are two things that are used generally when the urafa or the mutasawwifa engage with the inner meanings, the ta'wil of this religion. They use the term ibra, right? Ibra is to see and to have vision. It's not to close the eyes, it's to open the eyes. It's to witness, it's to see, it's to have nazar. And that's why when we say shahada, it is to bear witness. It's to be sensitized to. It's to give testimony to these realities and these truths. And all of these realities and truths, they do something to the heart. They do something to our inner life, our character, our truthfulness, right? Our being. As young people, at whatever age we may be in, this is the most interesting and important thing for us to hold on to, the heart. Right? The Prophet ﷺ mentions in multiple narrations to guard the heart, to protect the heart. The Quran in multiple instances talks about فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ مَرَضٌ فَزَادَهُمُ اللَّهُ مَرَضًا. That there is a sickness in their heart. There's a sickness in their heart. This sickness of the heart comes and it disrupts everything else. It disrupts everything else. Someone can be physically performing the Islamic acts of worship and still be sick. How can this be possible? How can someone stand in prayer and still have a sickness of the heart? How can someone recite the Quran and have a sickness of the heart? Now, if the intentions are pure, the sickness is lightened and lessened. But if the intentions are wrong, then just like the Khawarij and other groups, they perform the physical components and the physical acts of prayer and worship, but they have a sickness in their heart. We are the eve of Arba'een. The people who are standing intent on shedding the blood of Imam Hussein, salamullah alayh, they're reciting the Quran. They're reciting the Quran. The Quran is wahy. في قلوبهم مرض. There's a sickness in their heart. When the sickness is in the heart, the vessel of receptivity is closed off. It's shut. Right? The content is there. The act of transfer is taking place, but the vessel does not have the capacity to receive. It's like you take a pitcher, whatever liquid it may have, whatever content it may have, and you want to transfer it into something else, but it has a cover on it. It has a lid on it. You can pour it. There's contact being made, but there's no absorption, right? There's no reception. There's a zarf in the mabruf. There has to be receptivity. When there is sickness in the heart, when there is blindness and the lack of witnessing, you cannot receive the signs that are in the heavens and in the earth and within our own selves. So Islam comes in this context not to engage in mysticism or mystery with the meaning, which is the etymology and root in the English language, which is to close the eyes. It's not to close the eyes in Islam. It's to open the eyes. It's to have ibrah. It's to have nazar and discernment. It's to then come to the status of being a shahid, a witness, or a shaheed, right? And the shaheed is not simply the one who is killed in the external battle. That's one shaheed, right? Ayatollah Jawadi Amuli talks in depth about this. Shahada is not simply to die in the battlefield. That's one type of shahada. That's one way to become a martyr. If the intentions are right, again. And if we are living in times where this term is very loosely and lightly thrown away. So you have all of these terrorist organizations. I mean, they are terrorist organizations. There's no kind of if and buts about it. Who call the people who go and kill themselves and kill innocent individuals and others, they call them mujahid and shaheed, etc. None of this is true. These are khawarij. These are individuals who are outside of the path. But those who are interested in giving witness to truth, and the reality without committing justice and injustice and wrong, well, that is a shaheed. If it's in the realm of battle, if it's in the realm of saving others, etc. But there's another type of shahada in which the individual engages in battle against the nafs. Right? They are witness and they are victor over the nafs. This is also a battle. Right? Now, Johns Hopkins University recently did an interesting study in which they took a group of individuals who identified themselves as atheists. Okay? That's Johns Hopkins University. And by inducing certain psychedelic experiences, using things like DMT and others, in these psychedelic experiences opens the imagination and the experience to new things that normally, materially, you would not really witness or see. After the study has been done, I forget the exact percent right now, but 40 to 60% of these individuals, or I think more closely 60%, because it had to be majority of them, no longer were willing to identify as atheists. It's very interesting, right? So they induced this, what we would call mystical experience, right? A lot of, especially if you look at the West, and you look at experimentation with drugs like shrooms and LSD and psychedelics and other things, it's a way to create a rupture between the wrongs and the injustices that they felt is taking place in society, socially, politically, globally, right? And you see this large kind of migration towards the Eastern traditions and the Eastern world to experience Eastern philosophy, like Hinduism and Buddhism and Islam, right? Eastern music, even you have the groups like the Beatles going and spending time with Ravi Shankar and experimenting with classical Hindustani music and other things, right? So this idea to experience the mystical, or to be mystical, or to be or to be removed from the very strict confines of the materialism and the consumerism of the West is something that's very interesting to people, right? But when we talk about mysticism or irfan or tasawwuf from our tradition, remember two things. First of all, the meaning of mysticism and mystery coming from the root word to close the eyes, because in this tradition of irfan and tasawwuf, and these are synonymous, they mean the same thing. It is to open the eyes. It is to witness. And the eyes are a gateway to the heart. You can't have open eyes and discernment in basira without the basar, without the heart. You see? This is important in our tradition. And number two, that these experiences are connected to the real. They're connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So a group of individuals who identified themselves as atheists, right? Not believing in the spiritual, not believing in the immaterial, go through a number of psychedelic mystical experiences, and they come out and they say, we're no longer willing to identify as atheists. But the reason why I mentioned this, besides the point that it's a very interesting study, is that the experience that you and I are invited to as Muslims on a daily basis is a deeply mystical experience. The recitation of the Quran is a deeply transformative and irfani experience. Prayer, if it is to be performed correctly, is deeply transformative and irfani, right? And irfan is not anti-intellectual, but it also recognizes that the intellect is only one aspect of reality and human beings. Recently, I had a conversation with a dear brother who's here today, and we mentioned a very notable scholar, and it was noted that he doesn't like to engage in a lot of public discourse and engagements with people around philosophy of religion and God and other things. And it was narrated from him that someone asked at one point about the existence of God. And the person, a scholar, may Allah preserve him, takes out a plant and says, this to me proves that God exists. That's actually a very profound statement. There's been studies, if we are to go back, those people who spend time in nature, their perception of a creator is very different than those who don't. Whatever their idea of the creator may be, they don't, right? And one of the teachers used to say that the reason why when you go to nature, you feel something different, right? When you are in a forest, when you are in a field of flowers, when you see greenery, there's multiple, we don't have time, there's multiple studies that have been done that show in the context of healing for those people who are sick, those who have a window that shows some type of greenery, some type of nature, whether it's a tree, whether there's flowers or shrubs or something in their room, versus those who don't, the recovery period is faster, healing process is faster. Psychologically, those who see nature and neighborhoods and areas that have actual green zones and green areas, people tend to be happier. People tend to be less depressed, right? There's something in nature. But this teacher used to say that the people are missing something. Nature is a sign of God. And the human being in his or her fitrah, in his very essence, a very fiber of our being, we have been created and we have given witness to the reality of God. أَلَسْتُ بِرَبِّكُمْ قَالُوا بَلَى. We have already given this witness. We have already given this attestation. Am I not your Lord? And in the language of praise and this ecstatic realization, yes, of course. And in this life and through this religion, we are to experience and we are to repeat this bala. The entirety of life is simply saying this bala if we're successful. Every prostration, every dhikr, every prayer, every fast, every interaction that is rooted in khair is this confirmation of bala. It's this experience of bala, this harmony, it's the symphony of bala. All of existence, but particularly the human being. The human being has been given this heart that is the seat of the manifestation of the rahmah and the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Nothing in this world can comprehend or can resonate or be a vessel for this except for the heart of the human being. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam shows us and tells you and I how to purify and protect and maintain this heart. The moment that we lose the heart, the moment that we lose the purity of the heart, our external religion is questionable. It's tainted. You can go into the physical sajda, but if there's marad in the heart, the zikr is not resonating. That connection, sometimes if you go to these roads, they're doing some type of construction and they stop you and they have some cones and you have to merge this way or you have to go somewhere else, or there's a blockage, there's some type of prevention, some type of barrier that's there. When there is marad in the heart, that is a barrier. The dhikr that you are verbalizing is not resonating with the heart, right? And for Islam to be truly understood, there has to be harmony and agreement between the inner and between the outer. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for guidance and nur. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to purify for us our hearts and our intention. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to increase us in His remembrance and increase us in the love of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam and his Ahlul Bayt and the awliya. We ask you, Ya Allah, to grant us your mercy, to forgive us our sins and our shortcomings, to heal those who are sick, to release those who are burdened, to unify us under the banner of La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. Ya Allah, we ask you to open our eyes and grant us basira. We ask you, Ya Allah, to allow us to understand and to absorb and to recognize ibrah. And we ask you, Ya Allah, Ya Nur, on this blessed day, by the blessed name of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to take us not from this world until and unless we have this harmony and this realization. and this agreement and this purity both internally and externally. ربنا أفرغ علينا صبرا وثبت أقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. رب اغفر لي ولوالدي وللمؤمنين يوم يقوم الحساب. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase you and increase us in taqwa and in His remembrance and inspiration. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم
صل على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو عالم الغيب والشهادة هو الرحمن الرحيم. والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وشفيع قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أبو القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وآل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم نرغب إليك في دولة كريمة تعز بها الإسلام وأهله وتذل بها النفاق وأهله. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. يا حي يا قيوم يا من لا إله إلا أنت. أما بعد, respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has invited each and every one of us and has allowed us to enter into this path of Islam. In this path, we have a number of challenges, a number of crises that the individual experiences and goes through. After the initial tensions that may arise for a person seeking religion and seeking to understand religion, and once they become conversant and familiar and engaged with the physical practices and the physical performative components of religion, the key thing is that of authenticity. Is the individual authentic in how they appear? Are they authentic in their Islam? Are they authentic in their Iman? Are they authentic in their akhlaq and in their words? And this religion tells us that if you do not have this authenticity, your religion is in danger. There is the likelihood and the tendency to do things that are destructive if you do not have sincerity and authenticity. What are some of these destructive things? One of them is nifaq, to be a munafiq. Someone who says one thing, does another, who conveys commitment to the protection and perfection of this ummah, but works against it in various ways and in various means, and through various means. One of the other key ways in which this disrupts and destroys our religion is riyah. Right? This performative pretentiousness that we are a particular way. فَوَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنْ صَلَاتِهِمْ سَاهُونَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ يُرَاءُونَ وَيَمْنَعُونَ الْمَاعُونَ. This disease, that is the disease of riyah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, woe to those people who pray, but they pray to be seen. They pray to be seen. The physical component is there, but the authenticity isn't there. Right? Now, this is what we're trying to get at, is someone can have the physical features of Islam, but if there's disease in the heart, it's destructive. It's destructive to themselves, and it's destructive to society and to others. If we have a community, if we have a consort of individuals who are all people engaged in riyah, there's no truthfulness there. There's no trust there. The person who engages in riyah, first of all, doesn't trust themselves. They don't have trust. They don't have confidence. They don't have reliance upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They don't have aql and understanding that people cannot give them anything. There is no praise from people that is worth anything in place of the acceptance and rida of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I've mentioned this before to people. This is a very earth-shaking narration in which certain people on the Day of Judgment are awaiting their recompense and their reward. They're awaiting their jaza from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the prayers they've done, for the fasting they've done, right? For the acts they've done. And nothing is received by them. So they say, Ya Allah, where is our reward? And the response comes from the angels. They say, seek it from those for whom you performed it. La ilaha. Seek it from those for whom you have performed it. You didn't perform this prayer for Allah. You didn't perform this fasting for Allah. You didn't provide to the orphan and to the needy for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَيَمْنَعُونَ الْمَاعُونَ. They deny the very basic acts of assistance to those who are in need. وَيَمْنَعُونَ الْمَاعُونَ. There is a deep linkage between the socio-political components of a community and their spiritual reality. How much and how many orphans do we have who are in need in this ummah? How many poor people do we have who are in need in this ummah? Do we not have enough resources and enough money? Of course we do. Of course we do. These quote-unquote kings and royal families and others and rulers, they are sitting and using billions of dollars, not millions, billions of dollars. Look at Brunei. Look at how much money there is there. Look at UAE. Look at how much money there is there. Look at Saudi, right? Look at Jordan. There's tremendous amounts of money in these countries, not only to meet all of the needs of their own citizens and people, but if we are to truly have a conception of an ummah, of a unified community, there is more than enough needs to meet the needs of all other Muslims as well. Right? All other Muslims as well. If it's their education, if it's their housing, if it's their food, if it's medical needs, if it's infrastructure, if it's environmental preservation, we have all of the money. What we lack is actual sincerity. What we lack is actual foresight. What we lack is justice and equity in our communities and in these governments. And we lack the care for one another, right? So someone who's living in UAE, for example, and they're a citizen and they get their monthly money, or someone who's living in Qatar, they're making excellent money, 3-4 times sometimes what someone would get paid here in the United States. Some of these academics who go and teach in Qatar, they make tremendous amounts of money that academics in the United States can only dream of. But how much money is enough for us to become desensitized to the pains and to the needs of the rest of the ummah? How much? What's that check that has to be, what's that number that has to be written on a check for me? And once they give this, they say, Rashid, this is your money. How much would that be for me to say, I can turn a blind eye to what's happening. I can turn a blind eye to the abuses of this government. I can turn a blind eye to their dealings with unjust governments and unjust groups, right? I can turn a blind eye to the exploitation of young people in refugee camps who are being radicalized for political aims through these Salafist Wahhabist teachings. A group of takfiris that are being raised and wrought on the rest of the world. This fire that is leading to innocent people who have been killed, communities and countries being destroyed. How much money is going to be needed for me to actually be silent about that? How much money is needed for me to ignore the deep tensions and problems of anti-Shi'i sentiments in the Muslim world? How much? Right? These are questions. Salatul Jum'ah and this emphasis on the heart is that if our hearts are not purified, the rest of our religion is problematic. We're going through the movements. And it may get us to a certain point. I'm not saying that someone who prays, then their prayer is not accepted. That's with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But acceptance is the very starting point. Acceptance is just the starting point. If your aim is only for acceptance, may Allah help you with that. But it's to experience something. It's to realize something. It's to have your eyes opened to witness, right? And that's what we're after. As people, we deserve that. As human beings, you deserve that. To live a life in which you actually experience reality. You take a breath that is filled with inspiration. You experience the love of Allah subhanahu. You deserve that. You owe that to yourself. To hear a verse of the Quran recited and you are moved by it. That's a beautiful experience. That's a beautiful experience. But you deserve that, right? And you have to seek that. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to aid us in this seeking and to aid us in this experience and achieving it. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to break the hands and to break the backs of all the oppressors. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give a resounding victory and aid to all of those who are oppressed, especially our brothers and sisters in Afghanistan, in Palestine, in Yemen, in Kashmir, in the occupied areas of East Turkestan, our Uyghur brothers and sisters. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to aid our innocent brothers and sisters in India, wherever they may be, whatever condition they may be, and whatever type of injustice there may be at play. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to aid us as Muslims living in America and as Muslims living in the West in our understanding of Islam and in our practice of Islam and the preservation of a true Islam that is informed and inspired by the Quran and the prophetic tradition, that is outside of extremism and outside of parochialism and is outside of nafsaniyat and ill intentions and worldly and political considerations. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to correct us when we go astray, to preserve us and perfect us when we are inspired with goodness, and to increase us in His love and in the love of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and his Ahlul Bayt and the awliya, and the love of each other and the righteous. We ask you, Ya Allah, to grant us that which is best and perfect, and to protect us from that which harms our inner and outer realities. برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات.
اللهم صل على محمد.